Morning, everybody. How we doing today? It is a Tuesday, the 20th of December. 2022 is almost a memory. It's been a while since I got to have my hair down. I'll have to put it up here probably in a minute when a customer walks in or two, especially when I make food. But for now, it's nice to have my hair down. I enjoyed growing it out these last 3 years. It's probably been it's my COVID hair. I haven't cut my hair since COVID started, March of 20. And it's a pretty good head of hair by now. Not bad for a 50-year-old. But anyway, it got washed last night. Wearing it down this morning for a little bit. You know what I mean? Sometimes you just gotta. Today we're going to start our day with a little West Coast fun, a little West Coast fire. I guess I'll start this off by saying the missing pieces in the collection can sometimes drive you to madness. That one thing that you ain't got is the one thing you desire in this world more than anything else. And for those of you who watched my Discovery episodes the last few months, I got the missing piece. And I paid more for it than I probably should have. It is a beautiful copy. And it does complete my discography canon. Discovery canon. It's a nice little cover. I'm guessing this guy did a Chet Baker album cover too, but now that I think about it. It's Discovery number 2023, is it? 3023. 20 is a European, what's what we're looking for? Overseas label sequence. The 3000 sequence was the more modern American recording sessions. But again, Art Pepper. This is the stuff that Savoy purchased from Discovery, and they were, like I said, Savoy reissued a lot of the Discovery stuff. And these two Art Pepper 10 inches came out as Surf's Up, which is of course a song. I think it's on this one actually. No, it's on the other one. But those two Art Peppers, I mean, they're both wonderful sessions of quartet and a quintet. I think this is the quintet. Yep. There's a little water damage on the back, which I'm a little upset about, but especially considering what I paid for it. And I don't usually talk about what I pay for things because I don't think that's that important or the story that we're talking about here, but I paid $400 for this. And it's kind of a reward for me getting the cafe up and running and the good first few weeks we had. I'm like, you know what? I need to buy this for me. My obsessive compulsive nature is driving me nuts. I hate not having it in the collection. And so there it is. And we're listening to it right now. And of course, I've already kind of know the music from the Surf's Up record. But I always kind of dislike getting to know a second edition, as it were, of a record. I never listened to the Surf's Up record a ton, in part because I didn't always know, but I was never the biggest Art Pepper fan in the world, to be honest. You know, he's a bit like a Chet Baker in my mind, a guy that's very fueled by his drug addictions. And, I mean, he spent plenty of time in prison. And it's tough for a white guy to get into prison doing drugs. I mean, it's not impossible, obviously, but, I mean, a white guy's got to work a lot harder to get into prison for 5 years than a black guy does, especially in 1950s America. I mean, black guys could trip on the street in the wrong way and end up in prison. The white guys, it was a little bit more allowances made, and better lawyers and more technicalities exist in the books, and the numbers just back that up. That's not just me making conjecture. The incarceration of black males in this country has always been astronomically high. America has the highest prison incarceration rates on the planet. And so talking about freedom and human rights violations and the oppression of Chinese, the Russians, you name it, our prison rates are beyond, our prison populations are incredibly high, and the minority rates are completely distorted from the norm. I mean, the chances of you spending a long time in jail as a black or as a Latino in this country are far greater than if you're a white American. It's just the truth of it. Your sentences will be lighter. Your chances of getting out are lighter. your chances of being able to rehabilitate yourself in your post-prison life are greater as a white male. My wife works in the field with mental illness and some homeless and a lot of those type of programs. And she stumbles upon a lot of examples of people coming out of prison having a tough time finding work and finding housing, acclimating, and it's tougher when you're a black male. It just is. So along with this fantastic art pepper, and partly what made me pull the trigger is I've been kind of negotiating with this one guy on Discogs for this 10-inch, and he really didn't want to budge on it. He had it at $400, and that's what he wanted. That's what he wanted for it. And it was because he said he had so much into it, which, I mean, that's part of the economics of record buying today. 10 years ago, you bought records for $5 and sold them for $200. Nowadays, you buy a record for $300 and hope to sell it for $400. You hope. Again, it's just where the collecting industry has gone, and a lot of people who are buying records to sell them aren't getting them cheap like they once did. Even record stores have all had to really up their ante if they want to buy a collection, because there's 3 other record stores now that are just as hungry and thirsty for that product, and they will pay more. And so I hate to say this to record store people, but record store owners, but if you're selling records to a record store, you're kind of foolish at this point in this day and age to not go to 2 stores at least. Contact at least 2 sellers, and the sellers know. It's just part of the fairness of the deal. My eyes are watering a little bit, but it's nice not to be in construction mode anymore. I'll tell you that. Not just the aches and pains of the body of all the different, kneeling and stretching and all that stuff, but just the dust and it was tough on my allergies and sinuses big time. It was a real exercise in exhaustion, and all was being congested and my eyes filled with dust, and it was kind of awful. So on top of the Art Pepper record, he had a second record which I'm kind of after for a while. And once again, this record is something I already have a second edition of. Great West Coast piano player Gerald Wiggins shows up in a lot of sessions, and he continued to play in the jazz world for a long time. Into the 80s, if I remember, maybe the 90s possibly. He's a pretty prolific player. His work as a leader is not nearly as prolific, but there is still a lot of it. And Gerald Wiggins is just a great player. He has a record on Tampa. I think he has a couple records on Tampa. But if you remember anything I've talked to you about the Tampa record label, a lot of that's buying other small West Coast labels like Skylark and Dig and numerous other ones, and repackaging them, giving them different covers, different names, sometimes even changing who the lead artist is, and putting that stuff out again. And oftentimes the gap between the initial release and Tampa's purchase and reissue of it sometimes was a matter of months. These little labels came and went pretty fast in some cases, and the owner of Tampa, he was a bit of a shark eating little fish, and he kept putting out and repackaging. And as a tool of deception, he also repackages his own releases, and almost all Tampa releases have multiple covers. So it does get to be quite tricky with Tampa. But that's not to say there's not some great recordings on the Tampa label, because there are. It's great West Coast stuff. The Oscar Moore record, which comes from the Skylark label, that's fantastic stuff. And Oscar Moore played with Nat Cole for a long time, if I remember. But so Gerald Wiggins record, I have it already on the Tampa label. I think it's one of the first Tampa releases, honestly. Again, he has a couple on Tampa, so I'm not sure. I can't remember which exactly one it is. I'll have to look. But this is the original version of it on Dig. And there it is. It's a record I've kind of wanted for a long time. I have the Tanganyika record on Dig by Buddy Collette. And this label did not make a lot of records. They didn't make a lot of jazz records. Johnny Otis was one of the big figures on this label. And again, this is Wiggins. I like the cover a lot. And it's reminiscent of something you saw De La Soul doing decades later. You know what I mean? That's something we saw Tribe Called Quest doing. You know what I mean? So, cool cover. And again, I have the music already, but it's a great piano trio set. It's cool cover. It's something I wanted for a long time. And I've seen this record go for hundreds of dollars. He had one for 40. And obviously he didn't have as much into this. Because I asked him if he would sell me this for what he wanted. Would he throw this in? And that was the agreement we came to. And it's something I was able to live with because I wanted both these for a long time. And this one, I mean, I watched it end on eBay auction numerous times, close to 500. I've seen it go for more than that even. There was one that didn't have a cover that went for 200 something on eBay recently. Discogs prices, it's always been a record that was elusive. There was the Great Italian Job, which I talked about last month, where I bought it in Italy, and the guy said that he couldn't find it, and he sent me the Clifford Browns in their place. But this now completes my discovery, about 10 inches. And it's a label that kind of disappears at that point, and then resurfaces decades later. So there's a whole new discovery chronology. Different ownership, different management, different artists, still jazz. But the discography of Discovery, as we know it, which was based in Hollywood and then had an LA and New York base as well. This is the last piece for that. So one more label completed, one more reason to come here to the Jazz Shepherd Cafe and to dig into this resource that this collection is. It's a great educator. It's taught me a ton. I've tried to share as much of that with you as I can. But on some level, the best thing you can do is just come. I'll throw you the keys, and you can start digging through those shelves and look through each label's discography. And seeing that chronology as you flip through them, it's illuminating. It just does really teach you stuff. From graphic design to what players were where, when, and like, oh, so-and-so was on the West Coast at that point. I mean, like Alex Sonny Clark, you're like, oh, he's on the West Coast here? Interesting. I listened to a record yesterday where Sonny Clark was on the West Coast. I gotta pause this real quick. It was this record right here, Stan Levy on Bethlehem. I mean, but you all know I'm a big Bethlehem fan. Stan Levy was a great drummer. I think he was out of Philadelphia initially. And he works his way out west as a young one. He cuts his teeth on the West Coast, playing with Parker and Gillespie, even like some giants. And he has a couple great records at Bethlehem as a leader. He's on a lot of those great West Coast cool bop sessions, as I've called them. And like the band here is with Leroy Vinegar, Conti Candoli, Richie Kamuka, Frank Rosalino, and Sonny Clark. So it's a pretty insane lineup. It's a mixed race lineup. Bethlehem really was very cutting edge in 55, 56. Like I've told you many times, this is a cooking session. It's as close to hard bop as Bethlehem or white musicians really get. It's driving, it's hard. It just doesn't have that emotional angst quite the same. Even though Sonny Clark's a part of this record cooks. It's a very cooking record. But another thing on Bethlehem, I pulled this record out yesterday, Bethlehem B72, the BCP series. Herb Jeffries. And in spite of the wonderful little lady on the cover, who's a famous actress, if I recall, doing a little cheesecake. This is actually a male vocalist by the name of Herb Jeffries. And he played in a lot of low-budget westerns designed for black people back in the 40s and 50s. And so he had kind of a second career as a Hollywood film star. And plus he did some crooning and singing. And he's actually got a pretty rich baritone voice. It's a little more rigid than, say, the Hartman, with the creaminess and the velvet tone. It's a little bit more of a solid baritone somehow. I mean, it's thick and it's rigid, his tone, but it's also narrative. I mean, he's narrating. It's a great instructional video voice. This guy can do fucking great commercials, man. This record is fun, and what's even more interesting about it is that the great Russ Garcia and his orchestra, the Bethlehem Orchestra, are the ones backing him. And as I pointed out 100 times on this channel, when you have guys like Russ Garcia conducting and arranging, you end up with some fantastic stuff. This is a piece also on Bethlehem. This is from the 5000 series, which was a short run kind of pop jazz crossover imprint that Bethlehem did. This is also Russ Garcia, and this record is insane. It's got a vocal choir, but he's using the vocal ensemble as an instrument. I mean, Ellington, I think, would dig some of this, but it's really hip, cool mod meets some real jazz playing. There's some real horn playing, and the Russ Garcia Orchestra consists of the elite of the West Coast scene and the Bethlehem Cool Boppers, the Williamson brothers, Frank Rosalino, Charlie Mariano. I mean, it's a pretty insane core of musicians that make up those groups. And so when you have a little sax break or a little room for some playing, there's some insane musicians on these records. This one, again, is a vocal piece with Herb Jeffries, and it's an interesting piece. This one is one of the coolest things I've ever heard. I'm going to try to show you a bit of it real quick. There's nothing I can really compare this to. I need a charmed life, as you see. I mean, it's got real pop vocal ensemble. It's gorgeous, but it's got some real playing in it. I love Russ Garcia's mind. He's a clever guy. And I'm gonna jump his ahead a little bit here. There's some real crazy cool sax parts in some of these songs. I mean, it was meant to be a really unique experiment. And this song, "Charmed Life," for example, if you can stream it, it's awesome. It's so fun. It's so cool. It's so Vespa. I mean, if I had a Beret and a Vespa, I couldn't be any cooler than listening to some Russ Garcia doing "Charmed Life" on Sounds in the Night. And it's actually quite a cool cover. I mean, I like the National Geographic driving on a kind of lonely road with the headlights. It looks like it's kind of in the rain. It's misty and it's moody. A fantastic piece. I mean, again, real playing going on there. It's a really, really fun record. One of the coolest records I've played in a long time because it doesn't really have any lane. It's got its own lane. It sounds like it was made for one of the coolest movies ever or something, you know what I mean? Woo! Fantastic stuff here. Charmed Life. So, fun stuff. I mean, I really enjoy that type of stuff. And again, it's something that's very accessible. And you play it at a gig and people are going to be like, fun. But there's real playing in there, which gives it some meat and some bones and some structure. It's not just schlock. Russ Garcia is a very interesting player, arranger, conductor, and he hired the best of the best white musicians on the West Coast to make these records happen. And a lot of it does end up on Bethlehem, and I've enjoyed everything I've found by him. Dig into him. Last thing I want to talk about this morning real quick is one of the fun things I've been doing here is pulling out little chains of records or sequences of records from labels and kind of having the time to go through them. And so this morning, for example, we're going to go through 3513, Contemporary, The Great Party Kessel, Dwayne Tatro, Jazz for Moderns. Again, he's a kind of an arranger fella. And again, the musicians on this are insane. I think the Williamson brothers are on this as well. Bob Edwardson, Bill Holman, Jimmy Joffrey, Shelly Manne. So again, West Coast elite. And Hampton Hawes, who was a staple of the West Coast scene, playing with the Teddy Edwardses and the Dexter Gordons on Central Avenue. 3515, 3516 is Shelly Manne with his West Coast swinging sounds. And Shelly Manne had some of the most hard swinging groups ever. And then number 3517 in the solo spotlight, Howard Rumsey. And Howard Rumsey put together some of the greatest bands ever, regardless of what coast they were on. So that's one of the fun things about the cafe here is I'm kind of getting to go through sequential releases, having the time to do so, and really soaking in where a label was at that time. It's an interesting little thing to have some insight into. So that wraps up today's episode. Appreciate y'all for watching. Interesting stuff going on, and I got a lot of fun stuff that I'm lining up for you guys. So we'll talk to y'all soon. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, please do. Hit that like button. It helps with the algorithms, I've been told. And, have a great Christmas. I'll probably get one more little episode in between now and then. We'll see. Y'all have a great day. We'll talk to you soon. Peace.